Okay, there's two things that I've been wanting to say for a while and I haven't, because we kind of went on a bunch of different topics. The one was just now when we're talking about, the ability. So you want to, I think it's very good that you said you want to assume that you're doing it wrong, because I think something that a lot of people get in the way of, acquiring a native-like accent is pride or arrogance. So I know for a long time, and I think people call it the Dunning-Kruger effect as well, if you've probably heard of that. Yeah. That people think they're a lot better than they are and have this false sense of confidence. So when I was learning Cantonese for ages, I thought like I was really good, and then until I realised I actually sucked. Compared to someone from Hong Kong, it's actually really terrible. And I think that can kind of get in the way and kind of cloud it, and that you think you're so good that you don't look for where your gaps are, and that can really make you limit yourself. So I know what Matt versus Japan did, a YouTuber who talks about Japanese, which I'm assuming most people watching this video know who they are, know who he is. Actually, he has a Blue Yeti microphone, which is just a microphone that has an pluggable audio jack in the bottom. So basically what you can do is if I have a microphone there I could show you, but I don't want to, mess up give you horrible sounds through the phone. But you plug it in the bottom, and what it means is when you listen to it, you speak into that and you hear your voice back in real time. So as you speak, the output of the microphone goes through the headphones into your ears. So you say something, you can hear that in real time. So say if you were shadowing, I could, put like one of my headphones on through that, and then put these headphones on the top, and I have the actual audio from the next speaker going through there, and my audio going through this one. You can kind of compare really easily. And that's what he said he did for a long time, which I think is quite useful. And one other thing that I wanted to say is, going back a very long time when we're talking about Chinese characters, is so I used a method called Heisig, the Heisig method.
No, I'm familiar.
And I went through both books for that a long time ago. And I think what a lot of people go, and I think you touched upon it earlier, is that people tend to think that I don't want to come up with these weird stories because then I don't want to be relying on these stories to be able to recall or write a character every time I want to use it. But it's almost, like building a house. First you lay the scaffolding and then you build the house after, and then when the house is done, even if the scaffolding falls completely away, the house still stays there. So you can, do these things and come up with these memory tricks and stories and recognize patterns. But even now, like long after you forget what the English definition of the word is or the story or the pattern, you're still probably going to be able to recall the word correctly just because you used to recalling it at that point. So I know I said quite a lot there. I don't know if there's anything you want to say or retort or agree with. Or
well, I mean, I like I said, I use memory stories. I didn't use Heisig. I made up my own. There was a guy, actually a British guy named Callum. What's his last name? Callum McKay. He used to have this website like around the year 2000, which sounds like
predates YouTube. Yeah.
In internet years, it's a lot of years, but he had this website called Hao Yao. And Callum, in fact, he's the reason I got into learning about memory techniques. And if you're gonna like learn Chinese, you really need to know. In fact, our course, we start off the first lessons about the basics of memory techniques, because if you're gonna learn a couple thousand characters, you really need to understand what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just gonna waste a bunch of time. Like I could tell you, because I myself was wasted a lot of time. It's not really a waste because I end up turning it into something useful later. But anyway, Callum used memory techniques where he talked about breaking down character components and making memory objects for them, and then having like a spatial thing where you had a spatial location from a real place in your life. Like, so for me, all words that started with D were at my dad's house. So if I saw it anywhere in my dad's house, I knew if my memory story was anywhere in my dad's house, I knew it started with a D, and I could tell by the look. It's kind of like that. It's not exactly like that. I think memory palaces are more like you have a fixed object in there. It's like I have a building, and then there's like a statue when I walk in, and then I add something to the statue, and then I add something when they all stay there. This is different. This is like there was a spot, like for instance, da was at the front of my dad's driveway. So any story that took place in that location was pronounced da. And I also had a person who represented da. So when I saw that person, I knew it was da. When I saw the location, I knew it was da. So I had two chances of remembering the pronunciation. And the fact that it was at my dad's house already clued me to the fact it was D. which makes it easy. And then if you traverse all your locations in the same directions, then you can go back and forth in directional wise. And like say I forgot what this particular stop, the pronunciation was, you can go forward or backward until you get to one that you do know what it is, and then figure out what that one is. So it's super effective. But then so they would take place at that location, and then there'd be memory objects that were placed in the same position that they are in the character, and then there'd be some story, and there's also a tone person. So there'd be some tone person talking to the sound person, and then the objects would be part of the story, and that's how I memorized. Because Callum basically sat down and memorized 5,000 characters in a year and a half, which is that's a seriously amazing memory feat. Because I don't even know if I know 5,000 now. I'm sure I know over 4,000. I don't know exactly how many I know.
To write or recognize, because I'm sure to recognize you'd be able to recognize a lot more, but maybe to write, then I don't know.
I can write most of them. I mean, most of the ones I recognize I can write. I write a lot. I think you'll be surprised if you read a lot of academic papers and write academic papers, and I think it should be above 4,000 used in just that one domain, I'd imagine. I mean, so here's what I'm going on. I have this Excel spreadsheet with 3,500 characters in it, and I never really added to it. So I know around 3,500 for sure, because I had actually gone through this and marked a 1 next to all the ones I knew in that Excel spreadsheet. Not all in the same day, but over time, because I was interested in tracking my progress and all that. And the thing is, I haven't actively learned characters in forever, because I don't. When I say I don't need to, it's not that I always can do everything exactly right with all characters. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that for my needs in my research area, when characters appear that I don't know, it's usually because they're in some ancient text or something. There's an ancient example being given, and I don't know a character in that text. But I usually can understand the gist of the example anyway. So,
but I think past a certain point, even if you're coming against characters that you don't know that are new, past a certain point, I think if you have that much exposure to Chinese characters in general and the language, and you either pick it up by hearing it and seeing the subtitles, or just in a book and you look at the pronunciation, I think through the context of the book, if it's in a certain story, there's a very good chance if it comes up once in the book, it will come up 2 or 3 or 4 times. So I think when you get to that point, there's you just keep on reading and exposing yourself that you can pick up quite a lot without actually, deliberately studying it.
So actually, I have a really good technique for what you're talking about that I kind of stumbled upon. But when I was really acquiring my reading skills in Chinese, what I would do is every time I read a Chinese text, the first time a character appeared on a page and I didn't know that character, I would circle it, and I would set a number 3 or 5 that if I come across that character X number of times, I would look it up, and then I would write the definition on that page, and then in the very back of the book, on the very last page, I'd write the character and then what page number it appears on. So then later on, if I come across it again, I just flip to the back of the book, and then I can get the definition really easy without having to go stop what I'm doing and go looking it up. But just the act of circling the character the first time on each page that you don't know, it really elevates
in your
mind.
I can see that.
You do the same thing?
Not exactly the same, but I kind of write. I don't know if you can see it on the page. I kind of write the pronunciation on the page.
Right.
And normally if it comes up, I'm not quite as organized as you, but if the same character comes back up, a page or 2 later, I can just, if I forget it, I can just go back a page or 2.
So that's...
And I don't look up every single one I come against. It's either... I tend to look up stuff more at the start of the story, because, there's a lot of things like the protagonist names. Right. The first time it comes up, if it's the main character, I'm going to look up the word, because it's the main character in the book, obviously. Or if I feel like it's crucial to the story, then other than that, I go off more feeling of feel like if this has come up again, I ignore it the first time, ignore it the second time, or if it's again the third time, I'll look it up then. So I think it's similar, but not as systematic as you.
It's a good technique, because it's not it's a bad idea to look up every single character you don't know, because unless you already know 99.9% of them. I mean, if you're 60%, 70%. it's really disruptive to the learning reading process to look up every single character. So
you
it's
just
better
can't enjoy it at all as well, and you can't cover it around.
Yeah. It's not fun either. So like, unless you like looking up characters, in which case it is fun. But yeah. So for me, it's the same way. Like if I'm in a new field, like say I get a book and this certain character that I don't know shows up 5 times, I'll probably stop and learn it, right? Because it's at that point it's more annoying to not know it. But also the brain tends to gloss over things. Like if you understand the context but you don't know the character, a lot of times you don't even know that you came across a character you didn't know.
They'll just skip over it without even realizing.
Yeah. Like I learned that when I was studying for the GRE. Like I started underlining.
What's the GRE? Sorry.
It's a graduate something exam. I don't know what the R is for. Graduate. It's one of the exams to get into, like a lot, depending on what kind of grad program you're trying to get into in the U.S. I got my master's is in engineering as well, so I had to take it for my master's degree. Okay.
Is this something you do before a master's to kind of like gauge your level of?
No, it's just like when you apply to a master's program, it's one of the things they do. They look at your grades, they look at any papers you've written, they look at your GRE scores. It's just one of the hoops you got to jump through. It's really meaningless, to be honest with you.
You don't have that in it, I don't think, but okay.
It's a very meaningless exam, but you have to do it, so.
Alright. So when you were going through the GRE, then you
Yeah, so I was reading just in English books. I started underlining words I didn't know, and I was amazed at how many of them there were, because my impression was that I knew pretty much all of them. So it's this ability of your brain to just gloss over things in a context. Like if you're not actively looking for it, most of the time you're not going to have the feeling, hey, I don't know these words. You're just going to read the thing. So that's why it's helpful to circle the characters you don't know. But you just want to do it once per page per character. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of circles on the page. Right?
Yeah. I do find it quite interesting. I mean, if I was starting from the point, and I guess when you start learning Chinese, this probably, wasn't an option if it was predating the internet, but there's certain things that you can do. Like, I used a website called Link, LANGQ, which is run by a polyglot called Steve Kaufman.
I'm familiar with him.
He also speaks pretty good Chinese for anyone.
His Chinese is pretty good, yeah.
So whenever a new word comes up in the system that you don't know, it's highlighted in blue. Words that you've looked up already are highlighted in yellow, and ones that you know are white. So if it's a blue word, you know you've never seen it before. If it's a yellow one, you know, oh, well, I've seen this before at least, and you can choose to kind of skip over it or not, or look it up again. But it's just the fact that, you know, sometimes you're seeing a yellow word and it's just saying, I've looked this up, and you're like, have I? I have literally zero recollection of even looking it up in the first time. But stuff like that I think can be quite useful when you're first starting, because, you know, it's easier to get into more interesting content at an earlier point. And I think there's not, I don't know if it's a trick or whatever really, but when I first start, I like to read more extensively. So, for example, I'd pick something like maybe a thriller book with really short chapters that has maybe like 20, 30, 40 chapters or whatever. And if I literally just read one chapter a day, and the chapter's 1 or 2 pages, even if it's 60% known words, then I can look up every unknown word and read through it a few times, and it's under an hour. And then when you get better, go away from the intensive and more towards the extensive. I always found that quite useful as well.
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to remember how that worked for me, because it's been a long time since I did that, but I think it was when I got to I did ICLP. Are you familiar with that?
I know.
ICLP. ICLP is a language school in Taipei. It's like super intense. It's actually at Taida.
Okay.
But
is that the one that's NTU, right?
Yeah.
University. Yeah.
NTU actually has like 3 or 4 Chinese schools on campus. This is just one of them. This is the one that used to be related to Stanford University, and it was also related to IUP in Beijing. But it's very, very intense. Like I was learning 80 words a day. And I think when I was going through that school, it forced me into doing what you call the extensive thing, because I just couldn't do the intensive thing. I tried to, but because I had a system actually. I used was it a Palm Pilot device, another ancient.
I don't know what that is.
It's like it's kind of the precursor to a smartphone, but wasn't a phone. Although you could actually get an attachment for it that would make it a phone. But it was black and white. It didn't have color in it. But I had this software called Super Memo, and actually the Anki.
Oh, I've heard of that. It's like an SRS.
Yeah.
I think well, the Anki Ajax used it a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, Anki's SRS algorithm is based upon the Super Memo algorithm.
Because it's all based off the same research that was done on the forgetting curve, wasn't it? It's all based on the research that the one guy did, I think.
Yeah, that dude's super eccentric, man. Like, if you read about him, he's pretty bizarre. Like, he literally, like, he has this software where you can, if you want to read something, say, you just dump it into this software, and then you just keep dumping stuff that you want to read in the software, and every day it presents to you, like the SRS stuff presents to you what the cards you need. This presents to you the stuff to read. But I don't
think I'd like that, because I'd want to read the thing that I want to read at that moment, not like someone that's given to me.
Well, yeah, but it's even weirder, because, like, so the split second you get bored with it, you're supposed to just get rid of it and go on to the next thing.
Just get rid of the whole book.
Well, I mean, it's electronic, so whatever article you're reading or whatever, you just get rid of it if it starts getting boring. And then his sleep patterns are also determined by a very similar algorithm. Like, you can sleep in a way where it's not continuous, like 8 hours or 6 hours or whatever, but it's like 30 minutes here and then wait 2 hours, another hour and stuff like. But his sleep pattern is actually also run by some kind of algorithm.
I've heard of people do similar things, but then I've also heard that after a few weeks, then they just end up like it might be productive for a short space of time, but in the long term, I've heard it has negative health effects and people start feeling really tired and stuff.
Yeah, I've never.
Something I've only heard from word of mouth. Not something I've looked into to any sort of real extent.
I gotta have my sleep, and I gotta have at least 6 hours. So I'm not even interested in anything telling me to sleep for 2 hours. Then wait, I don't even want to try it.
Yeah, the same. It was more like 8 for me, but yeah.
Yeah, well, 6 depending on how many days in a row. But yeah, I don't want to mess with my sleep. But yeah. So what were we? We were talking about SRS.
Super Memo, you were talking about when you first got into learning characters before.
Yeah. So I would learn like 3 to 5 characters a day, and then that number minus 20 words. Or no, sorry, 20 minus that number of words that use those characters. So for each of the 3 characters, I would have as many words that use that character as I could, and I literally like wore both sets of buttons out on my Palm device, because I just sit there clicking, got that card, give myself the grade, go to the next card, and it's very effective. And I was using the memory techniques on top of that with the SRS. But I think if you were to base that based on our stuff, it'd be a lot better, just for the fact that. And
then you can use Anki instead of Super Memo.
Well, I use Anki now. Yeah, I mean. I don't know if he had a desktop version of that program, but it was so like anti-intuitive that I could never use the thing. Like, if you wanted to save a file, you'd have to go 28 menus deep into some weird thing before it would say save file kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Anki is just there's so many people creating great tools and add-ons for Anki at the moment. There's people that have created something like if you're watching a Netflix show and they've got like the subtitles in the bottom and it comes across a sentence that you want to turn into an Anki card, they've got something where now you can press one button and it takes the audio and a picture on the sentence and creates an Anki card for you there and then. And there's stuff like that can do that. It's just like pretty crazy things. Whereas, it gets rid of all that manual labour and fiddling. Seems pretty good, yeah. I just don't use Anki very much anymore, but it seems very useful.
Yeah, I was using it for Japanese last year, but I'm not using it this year.
Gambatte.
Gambatte. So desu ne.
So desu.
Actually, what's funny is Japanese pronunciation is actually harder than Mandarin. When everybody tells you it's easier, but the people that tell you that are the ones that don't understand pitch accent. But when you throw pitch accent into the mix, it becomes much more difficult.
You know, I think most of the people that tell you, and this is, I think for any language, most of the people that tell you pronunciation in language A is easy, most of the time it's because their pronunciation sucks and they just don't realise it.
Right.
But yeah, I've heard that the pitch accent patterns are a lot more harder and unnatural, or not unnatural, but just harder and more like harder to hear it clearly than a tone. You know, like if you look at the 4 tones in Mandarin, they all sound quite different. Whereas apparently, when I was speaking to Matt, he said for Japanese they're actually, you know, quite hard to pick out relative speaking to the tones in Chinese.
That and that the tones in Chinese are much more predictable. I mean, Japanese words, because like you also have sentence level phenomena, like phrase level phenomena and all that changes accents, and when you add stuff and subtract stuff, it changes the accent. So you have to actually know that when you add shijian to the end of a number, that it changes the pitch accent. Because like the numbers will have a pitch accent, and then when you add, like when they say shijian means hours, like, so it'll change the pitch accent of the whole thing, and you got to know that. If you don't know that, you're gonna be saying the pitch accent that it says in the dictionary. It's gonna sound wrong.
And then also, I think the same word would be said with different accents depending on the region, right? Different pitch accents.
But that doesn't matter. I mean, you just choose a region and stick with it.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're gonna learn pitch accent in another region, it's not gonna be very easy, because all the information that I've seen is based on Tokyo. I mean, you can find graduate papers on it.
I mean, I was just thinking about myself because I'm interested in learning Japanese at some point. I don't think I'm going to learn it to a particularly high level because my Chinese still needs like so much work that I don't think I have the time, to be honest. But most of my friends that are from Japan are from Osaka, so
okay.
I don't know. Maybe would it be weird to pick up like was it Osaka Ben or Osaka Ban?
Yeah, Ben.
Ben. It's yeah.
Oh yeah, so in Tokyo you say arigato, in Osaka you say arigato.
It sounds different in the way you stressed it then, but
the one from Osaka goes down on the last syllable, arigato, and the one in Tokyo would be
just high flat.
Arigato.
It's just weird because apparently when you ask a lot of Japanese people, they say it's all flat. Like they say it's a very flat language.
You know who Dogen? Do you know who Dogen is?
Yeah, I've seen his Twitter.
He's got a really funny. His pronunciation is really good too, but he's got a really funny video about that, because the word flat in Japanese, they say fratto, which isn't flat, right? So the teacher's telling him, the teacher says something about the pitch accent, and then Dogen says wakarimashita, which is normal, wakarimashita, and he says, no, Dogen, it's flat. He goes, wakarimashita. And so he actually says it flat, which sounds crazy unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
And then so he goes, oh, fratto. Fratto. And he's like, hey, fratto desu, fratto. And then the teacher finally realizes I'm telling him to say it flat when my finger's not doing a flat thing. Because it's actually fratto. So, but yeah, it's not flat.
His Japanese is super impressive as well.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, it's not flat. They say it's flat, but then you start pointing stuff out to them, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, wait, oh okay."
Cool. So back to the sort of rough topic of the video. From whether we are still recording. Is there anything else that you want to bring up or say about, the method, learning Chinese in general? Do you want to try speaking a bit in Chinese now, or I don't know?
你说我们两个讲中文的意思吗？
都可以啊，看你啊。
学中文啊，要非常的努力。如果要一点点的学，就不大可能会学会。
对啊，那你也要看那个学会是这么定义学会，因为你知道吗？学还无涯。
学会就是
没有学完的那个 概念。
没有，对，没错，学完不可能啊，对啊，学完的是不可能的事情，但是学会的意思就是
台湾腔
说，
的。
哎呀，我住台湾很久了嘛，学会的话就是你可以比较自然的跟人聊天，或者说要写个 email 就很快的写个 email，这个意思。
好，
学到你可以把
流利的沟通的那个程度。
对，可以沟通啊，然后可以使用这个语言达到你自己的目标。
理解。对，反正我觉得你要看你的目标是什么，因为很多人他们的目标可能是要跟朋友们聊聊天，跟你的目标是完全不一样。你要用你的中文上班，还是你有做那个研究是吧？那这个需要的程度跟你朋友聊天需要的程度是完全不一样的。
很不一样。
那可能他们不要看很多跟那些什么语言学有关的那些论文，但是你需要，所以你要看你的目标是什么。那如果我要实现那个目标，我应该做哪些事把那个目标实现？
没错。对啊，所以呢，你如果要使用我们的那个学汉字的这个方法，你就可以达到一些，比如说学术的目标。你真的要使用汉字达到目标的话，用我们的方法可以做的比较快，而且比较没有那么的那当然用我们的方法，我不是说很容易啊，你不用下手啊，可以聊天啊就可以啊，我根本不是这个意思。你还是需要每天练习，每天学新的字，每天看书，这些都需要做。可是你可以把这个辛苦的这一块弄小，对，弄小一点，对。
那你意思就是说，你要刚开始学的时候，你是一个那个初学者，你可以背一些单字，一些汉字。但你背那些汉字以后呢，你可以做比较好玩的事，你可以专心看书啊、聊天啊，还是看那个电视剧之类的吧。那我还有一个问题，那很多人啊，他们说他们想学中文的时候呢，他们会说，我只想学怎么聊天而已，那汉字的话太复杂，我不要学。那你怎么回答这个问题？
这个，
因为我自己认为啦，学汉字，不管你的目标是看书还是聊天，学汉字都是很有帮助的。
我自己也这么认为。你如果完全不会字的话，你这个能够做的事情非常非常的有限，非常的有限，而且你也没有办法听一个你没有听过的一个单字，然后猜测它是什么意思。就比较难。
我觉得你刚刚说的很对，就是你可以做的事是有限的，
非常的有限。
比如说，连跟你的朋友打字都不可以，都不能。如果我是要约好我的朋友，好吗？我会跟他说那英文好吗？因为你会打 Do you want to go to the pub？ 那如果中文连你要不要去 pub 啊都不会写，那你没办法跟他联络，你要打个电话还是再见面才可以问这个问题。
而且也不能跟他们用拼音或者 bopomorpho 交谈。
对，
因为他们没有这个习惯，然后他们会觉得很奇怪。
他们要看那个注音的时候，如果是把那个当作汉字看的话，他们会可能会看得懂，但是他们会很吃力才看得懂吧。
对，他们会觉得很奇怪。 除非你跟小朋友这样聊天应该可以。
哦，对啊，因为他们都是用那个注音是吗？我看那个小孩子的书啊，都是在上面都是有那个注音。
可是同时那个拼音，你在中国大陆用拼音交谈，他们也没有这个习惯。
没有吗？
没有用拼音交谈的习惯。
哦，是哦。
他们能够看得懂，可是他自己要回你，应该会觉得非常的不自然。
了解。好像香港也是这个样子。你听过那个什么粤拼什么粤拼？粤拼对。这个很多是，如果你不是一个广东话的老师，你不会知道那个是什么东西啊。
对。而且你看香港人自己用罗马字写广东话，
都是不一样的，我
很不一样，
搞不清楚是什么意思啊。
很不一样。
还有很多那些什么华侨，他们会试试看那个罗马字打广东话的时候，我真的搞不懂那个是什么意思啊。我覺得很吃力。
係啊，就係咁樣嘅。嗰啲香港人㗎，點算啊？
呢個係真係好大嘅問題，就係廣東話唔係。我真係好耐冇講廣東話，唔好意思啊。
唔緊要㗎。
係咁啦，呢個粵拼還有都有呢個一日啦。但係咧國語嘅話咧，只有呢個拼音。所以咧你要學呢個國語嘅時候，只要學拼音就好。但係廣東話嘅話咧，就係很多唔一樣嘅呢個音，你一定要學，因為每個唔一樣嘅呢個教材有可能會用唔一樣嘅呢個拼音。你聽得出，我真係好耐冇講廣東話。
係啊，唔緊要㗎，做得好好㗎。
哇！
其實每一個廣東話嘅課本，差唔多都有唔一樣嘅拼音。
係冇錯。
係啊，我都係嘅，好耐冇講廣東話嘅。
我聽唔出，真係好犀利啊！點解你想學廣東話？
點解啦？
因為好多呢啲鬼佬，佢哋唔想學廣東話。佢哋喺香港嘅時候咧，都唔想學啊。
係啊。
因為咧，佢哋話啦，國語比較有用啊。你
睇下你喺邊度㗎？喺香港嘅廣東話好有用嘅，同埋
係
廣東話有其他地方都有人講啊，廣東㗎嘛，同埋美國嘅華僑啊，好多識講廣東話㗎。
英國
多倫多人都係嘅，係啊。其實咧，點解想學廣東話嘅係因為好中意㗎。我覺得廣東話嘅音好好聽㗎，同埋廣東話嘅講法，廣東話嘅講法好有趣味嘅。我覺得國語嘅比較悶啲㗎嘛。國語嘅
冇錯。
係啊，我講國語，我講得好普通嘅。不過咧，廣東話有好多好有趣味嘅講法，或者呢啲講法嘅嘢好快會改變。所以一直都要學新嘅嘢。所以呢個我都好中意㗎。
我 都有一樣嘅一個感覺啊，都係因為你去香港嘅時候或者澳門嘅時候咧，你同佢哋講國語，佢哋嘅感覺就係好普通啊。但係咧，你講廣東話嘅時候咧，你係
佢哋嘅翻譯好唔一樣嘅，係啊。佢哋嘅翻譯
家人一樣，
好唔一樣嘅，好唔一樣。講普通話同埋講廣東話嘅，佢哋嘅翻譯好唔一樣。好唔一樣。
係啦。那我呢？我個女友就係香港人。
好好㗎。
所以呢個就係我嘅原因。原因。
原因。
原因。
即係同埋國語嘅話，原因廣東話原因。
係喎。
國語嘅二聲係廣東話嘅第四聲。
第四聲。
四。所以來圓。
真的很好玩呢。我真的是不是啊？要玩一玩。那你有覺得是你想講嗎？還是差不多吧？
應該差不多吧。講完了。
真的很感謝你。我們應該可能用英文結束吧。
Okay.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I've learned an awful lot. It was a lot of fun. Really nice guy, very knowledgeable. And I'm definitely going to check out some of the stuff he's talked about. So yeah, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah. Cool. So thank you very much for everybody who watched, especially if you've made it this far into the video. I really appreciate it. And I'll leave a link to all of Ash's links to Outlier Linguistics YouTube channel, Twitter, and I'm forgetting something, and website. And YouTube channel, website, and Twitter in the description box below. So don't forget to check it out, subscribe, and all that good stuff. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Cool.
Peace.
All right. See ya.